Hello and welcome back to one more session of reading comprehension, and for this also the PDF will be in description. But before that, download the app so that you can get free access to free IPMAT prep content and also free doubt solving sessions. And of course, you can earn a few iCoins and make some money if you engage yourself on the app. You may like a comment, you may comment or like or whatever you want to do. But yeah, if you per question you got 40 for quant, 70 rupees for LRDI, and for VRC it's 50. So I think you can redeem after 500 or up. Of course, our new batches launch ho chuka hai 27-28. Take a pick, boy. All right, please read. You may pause and keep reading. Question number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. And number 6. All right. So now that you have solved it, we can start the discussion part. So we read the passage first. Economics and finance. Central banks now hold more than 36,000 tons of gold, the highest level since 1975. Gold buying accelerated after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. All right. According to the World Gold Council, central banks have purchased an average of 1,000 tons annually over the past 4 years, twice the average of the previous decade. Okay. So अब आप you can easily figure out कि भाई सब fact based ही रहेगा, इसमें कोई philosophy तो है नहीं, ठीक? So in the first few lines we can understand that gold buying has increased. This surge in demand has contributed to rising gold price. Simple सी बात है, if the demand increases, the price also increases. Rising gold prices and nearly 45% of surveyed central banks expect to increase their holdings further. And abhi bhi 45% of surveyed central banks, they expect to increase their holdings further. So it is not coming down any soon, it is going to increase. Central banks maintain reserve assets to support their currencies during financial stress or intervene in markets when necessary. तो क्यों खरीदते हैं? To maintain reserve assets to support their currencies during financial stress or intervene in markets when necessary. So that is why they maintain reserve assets. These reserves typically consist of foreign currencies, government securities such as US treasuries, bank deposits, cash and precious metals like gold. तो क्या क्या हो गया इनके पास? Consist of foreign currency, government securities like US treasuries, bank deposits, cash and precious metals like gold. तो ये reserve consist करते हैं. They help countries withstand currency crisis or periods when international borrowing becomes difficult or expensive. The recent increase in gold purchases has been driven primarily by emerging and developing economies, particularly Russia, China, Turkey, India, and Kazakhstan. One major reason is gold's historical performance during periods of economic uncertainty. When there is economic uncertainty or downturn, then gold का price जो है वो ऊपर चले जाता है. ठीक है, inversely proportional होता है if you understand a bit of it. Central banks also view it as a long-term store of value, especially during inflation, and as a means of diversifying reserve portfolios to reduce overall financial risks. तो एक ही पे invest नहीं करते हैं, the multiple things that we keep in our portfolio, so that if one incurs a loss, we can recover through the other investment. Another important motivation is protection against financial sanction. तो एक तो क्या है कि means of diversifying reserve है, and दूसरा motivation क्या है? is protection against financial sanctions. Sanctions restrict a country's access to international financial markets and payment systems, allowing governments to exert economic pressure. Research suggests that the growing use of sanctions by the US, the European Union, and their allies has encouraged several emerging economies to increase gold holdings. And sanctions के चलते भी लोग जो है, या fear of sanctions के चलते भी लोग gold में invest कर रहे हैं. The economies, that is. Russia provides the clearest example. After sanctions followed its annexation of Crimea in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. तो sanctions पड़ गए इनके ऊपर. The Russian central bank accelerated gold purchases following Russia's exclusion from the SWIFT payment system and the freezing of roughly $300 billion of its foreign reserves in 2022. Several other countries, including China, Turkey, and India, also increased gold acquisitions. तो ये freeze कर दिया गया. तो इसके बाद जो बाकी countries थे like China, Turkey, and India, they also started buying gold. The World Gold Council found that more than 1/3 of emerging market central banks cited concerns about sanctions or possible changes in the international monetary system as reasons for holding more gold. So more than 1/3 emerging market central banks cited concerns about sanctions as the main reason for holding more gold. This trend has also changed the composition of official reserves. Okay, this trend has also changed the composition of official reserves. According to European Central Bank research, gold now accounts for a larger share of global official reserves than US treasuries. So gold has surpassed US treasuries, partly because of the sharp rise in gold prices. Nevertheless, gold still represents only a relatively small portion of total reserve access. US treasuries तो आगे निकल गया है, but overall अभी बहुत छोटा portion है of total reserve assets, particularly in emerging economies. Gold's renewed importance contrasts with earlier decades. After the collapse of the Bretton Woods system in 1971, many central banks steadily reduced their gold reserves. अच्छा, 71 के बाद क्या था? Central banks were reducing the gold reserves. Australia sold most of its holdings in 1997, while the United Kingdom sold large quantities between 1999 and 2000. Both at prices that later appeared exceptionally low. तो जब ये सेल किया इन्होंने तो बाद में the gold price have really shot up ना, तो लगता अरे यार कितने सस्ते में बेच दिया. In hindsight, those sales proved costly as gold prices rose dramatically. तो maybe they did not expect it कि gold का price इतना तेजी से ऊपर जाएगा, and hence वहाँ पे थोड़ा loss incur कर गए होंगे. Despite this revival, gold is unlikely to regain the central role. Okay, revival तो हुआ है, but it is unlikely to regain the central role it held under the gold standard. Nevertheless, as long as geopolitical tensions, financial uncertainty, and the possibility of sanctions persist, क्या? Geopolitical tensions, financial uncertainty, and the possibility of sanctions persist, central banks are likely to continue viewing gold as an important component of their reserve portfolios. So overall, the central banks are holding more gold mainly क्योंकि sanctions का डर रहता है या फिर geopolitical tensions and financial uncertainty है. But still gold is not expected to like dominate as it did under the gold standard. तो बढ़ तो रहा है लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है कि बिल्कुल prime आ जाएगा वो. ठीक है? Okay, so these are 3-4 important points and now we can go and attack the questions. Question number 1. Which of the following best captures the central argument of the passage? Okay, A. The resurgence of gold demonstrates that the international monetary system is gradually returning to gold-backed framework. Beta kahin se bhi, it is not coming to gold-backed framework. Gold standard wala prime time nahi aane wala. Eliminate it. B. Gold has once again become the world's most important reserve asset because central banks have lost confidence in government securities. It's not about the loss in government securities. Reasons क्या थे? Sanctions थे, geopolitical tensions हैं, and financial uncertainty थी. So I don't think exclusively we can say they lost confidence in government securities. C. The principal reason for the rise in gold prices has been the aggressive buying undertaken by Russia after 2014. But this was just an example. It's not as if prime reason ही हो गया. D. The recent increase in central bank gold holdings reflects not merely investment considerations, but also changing geopolitical realities that have made gold strategically valuable despite its diminishing monetary role. बिल्कुल सही बोला है. Role तो diminish कर गया है, but because of this, it is strategic to hold more gold by the central bank. ठीक है ना, तो we go with D for Delhi. बाकी हमने logically eliminate भी कर दिया. Question number 2. Which of the following can be most reasonably inferred from the passage? All right. A. Gold has become a superior investment to all government securities during periods of economic stability. But the passage does not talk about economic stability. जब economic uncertainty है, they are talking about when there is economic uncertainty. So this is eliminated. B. Developed economies have largely stopped holding gold because they now rely almost entirely on financial assets. ये तो information है नहीं हमारे पास mainly, ठीक है, and plus have largely stopped because they almost entirely, absolute बता रहा है ये भी, तो इसको हटाते हैं. C. Countries most vulnerable to geopolitical tensions are likely to attach greater importance to reserve assets that cannot easily be frozen by foreign governments, and that is why probably they are buying more gold. ठीक है, hold करते हैं इसको, D पे आते हैं. D says countries that maintain larger gold reserves are generally less exposed to currency crisis than those that hold foreign exchange reserves. It is not as if that they will not have the crisis. They will have crisis, but maybe they can tackle it better. So you cannot say that they are less exposed. But less exposed नहीं है, शायद exposure उतना ही होगा, but they can manage it better if they've got higher gold reserves. तो exposure का बात नहीं बेटा कर सकते. तो we can go to C. Countries most vulnerable to geopolitical tensions are likely to attach greater importance to reserve assets that cannot easily be frozen by foreign governments, and hence they buy gold. Question 3. Which of the following assumptions most strongly underlies the author's explanation for the renewed demand for gold? क्या assume करके वो explain कर रहा है renewed demand for gold? Okay. A. Reserve assets are valued not only for their financial returns but also for the degree of control governments retain over them during geopolitical conflicts. I think this is, it covers almost everything. Reserve assets are valued not only for their financial returns but also for degrees of control governments retain over them during geopolitical conflicts. अगर sanctions लगते हैं तो कितना control है economy के ऊपर central banks का. Okay. B. Gold prices will continue rising as long as emerging economies keep purchasing bullion. Even if gold prices keep rising, the central discussion was why central banks are holding more gold reserves, because of sanctions and uncertainty, not because of pricing expected to rise and they can make more money out of it. C. Countries imposing financial sanctions are unlikely ever to restrict access to gold markets. Countries imposing financial sanctions are unlikely ever to restrict access to gold markets. And D says central banks primarily manage reserves to maximize long-term investment returns. बेटा main theme हमारा returns है ही नहीं, ठीक है? तो this is gone. Let's read C once again. Countries imposing financial sanctions are unlikely ever to restrict access to gold market. Unlikely ever, again an extreme option. Tick. We can go back to A. It says reserve assets are valued not only for their financial returns but also for the degree of control governments retain over them during geopolitical conflicts. So, saaf upar, if you go back to the first part, let's go back to the first part. To support their currencies, read this one. Central banks maintain reserve assets to support their currencies during financial stress or intervene in markets when necessary. And that is why they are going with gold. Number 4, okay. Suppose international institutions develop a universally accepted financial settlement system that cannot be controlled or restricted by any individual country, okay. Which of the following would the author most likely conclude? अब कोई individual country control नहीं कर सकता तो sanctions नहीं है. Sanctions नहीं मतलब people can go back to reducing their gold reserve. देखते हैं. A. Gold would immediately lose its value as a reserve asset because sanctions would become impossible. Gold would immediately lose its value. No, it will not lose its value. Maybe the proportion of it in the portfolio decreases, but it's not as if gold ka value ही zero हो गया. B. One important incentive for increasing gold reserves would become weaker, although other motivations for holding gold would remain. Yes, one important incentive, that was controlling the market when sanctions or financial uncertainty is there. तो ये तो हम hold कर सकते हैं बेटा. Central banks would rapidly replace gold with US treasuries as their dominant reserve assets. Central banks would rapidly replace gold with US treasuries. I don't think this was the assumption. क्योंकि प्लस अब तो कोई इंडिविजुअल कंट्री उसको कंट्रोल कर भी नहीं रहा, तो व्हाई वुड दे गो फॉर एनी इंडिविजुअल कंट्री ट्रेजरीज. हटाते हैं. डी, emerging economies would stop diversifying their reserve portfolios. Emerging economies would stop diversifying. बेटा गोल्ड का एक काम डाइवर्सिफिकेशन भी तो था ना. If you can spot that. This trend has also changed the composition of offshore reserves. Okay. Okay, हाँ. Central banks maintain reserve assets to support their currency during financial. Okay. These reserves typically consist of foreign currencies, government securities such as US Treasury, bank deposits, cash and precious metals like gold. So it is a bouquet. It's not as if individually एक चीज पे depend करता है. So I don't think they can remove gold in totality. Fine. So it is not that they would stop diversifying their reserve portfolios. They will still diversify. So इसमें हम कहाँ पे थे? इस पे थे B. One important incentive for increasing gold reserves would become weaker, although other motivations for holding gold would remain. Number 5. The discussion of Australia's and United Kingdom's gold sales primarily serves to, they sold it at a price which in the hindsight seems to be very low. तो थोड़ा नुकसान हो गया उनको. Had they kind of held it, they would have made more money. A, argue that central banks should never alter the composition of their reserve portfolios. Should never alter. अरे जब gold उनको strength दे रहा है तो they can alter ना, and obviously they have been altering. B, demonstrate that governments should avoid selling reserve assets during periods of falling prices. Should avoid selling reserve assets during periods of falling prices. I don't think they were, the examples of Australia and UK were given to make us understand this, that you should never sell when the prices are falling. C, establish that political leaders consistently underestimate the future value of gold. But we are talking about central banks, not political leaders. Eliminated. D, illustrate how changing economic circumstances can significantly alter the perceived wisdom of reserve management decisions. They possibly took a wise decision according to the situation, but in the long run, it proved to be a bad decision and they could have made more. They could have had more returns on their gold investment if they had stopped, if they had not sold it earlier. So, I think we can happily go with D for Delhi. Number 6. Which of the following, if true, would most weaken the passage's central argument? Central argument क्या था? Sanctions के डर से लोग gold खरीद ले रहे हैं. ठीक है. A. Several emerging economies substantially increase their gold holdings despite facing neither significant geopolitical tensions nor meaningful sanctions-related risks. Okay. Several emerging economies increase their gold holdings though they don't face any significant geopolitical tensions or meaningful sanctions. तो हमें कुछ और central theme बताना पड़ेगा. फिर the fear of sanctions will not remain the central theme when you try to explain why central banks are buying more gold. But I think इसको हम hold कर सकते हैं. Let's see B. Gold prices decline sharply over the next 5 years despite continued purchases by central banks. Okay. Gold prices decline sharply. बेटा again returns की तो बात है नहीं हमारी central idea की, protection की बात है यहाँ पे and diversify करने की बात है. C, the proportion of global reserves held in foreign currencies remains larger than that held in gold. ये weaken तो नहीं करेगा क्योंकि ये तो बोला ही है कि global reserves के जो है वो already gold से proportion जो है global reserves in foreign currencies that still remains higher than gold. तो वो तो है नहीं ऐसा कोई. D, some developed economies modestly increase their gold reserves after a period of financial instability. So this again does not weaken. ये भी तो फेवर में ही जा रहा है ना कि इकोनॉमी जब इंस्टेबिलिटी होती है तो banks tend to buy more gold. Reserve banks, they tend to buy more gold. We need to weaken. So let's go back to A and see. Several emerging economies substantially increase their gold holdings despite facing neither, ना उनको geopolitical tension है और ना ही कोई meaningful sanction related रिस्क है, फिर भी वो गोल्ड ले रहे हैं. हमारा आर्ग्यूमेंट क्या था? दैट पीपल बाय गोल्ड, सेंट्रल बैंक्स दे बाय गोल्ड बिकॉज ऑफ द रिस्क ऑफ सैंक्शन एंड इकोनॉमिक इंस्टेबिलिटी. ये वहां है भी नहीं तब भी वो गोल्ड ले रहा है. ठीक, तो दिस इज द वन दैट वीकन्स द सेंट्रल आइडिया ऑफ द पैसेज. तो वी हैड 6 क्वेश्चंस. प्लीज मार्क योर आंसर्स, कितने सही कितने गलत. दिस वाज अ स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड वन. इकोनॉमिक्स का था, सीधा साधा रहता है. तो बताइए बेटा, कमेंट करिए, लाइक करिए, कुछ करिए, कुछ मत करिए, बट सॉल्व कर लीजिए प्लीज. ऑलराइट, एंड ऑफ कोर्स यू गॉट टू मेक सम डिसीजंस रिगार्डिंग इफ यू वांट टू मेक सम मनी बाय एंगेजिंग योरसेल्फ ऑन iQuanta app. And of course, one major decision of your life, you join the batches for 27 or 28. Thank you.